is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with David Lammy.
So the numbers of drivers aged 90 and older have doubled to more than 150,000 in the last 10 years. A record 153,000 British 90-year-olds hold driving licence despite concerns that eyesight deteriorates rapidly when you get older, and certainly when you get into your 90s. The number has risen from half of that just 10 years ago, and the AA is campaigning for drivers to be required to show evidence of regular eye tests to carry on driving once they reach 70. At the moment, the current rules means that over 90s have got to renew their licence every 3 years, and all drivers, of course, have got to meet vision tests in their standards of driving. And they're legally obliged to notify the DVLA if there's a medical condition that can affect their fitness to drive. But the truth is there's no mandatory testing. Now, I remember one of the last cases I did as a barrister was representing a woman who was 89, and she did a 3-point turn on Highgate Hill and crashed into 3 vehicles as she did this. And I was representing her as a young barrister and trying to keep her licence. And she only ever went a short journey to visit her sister in a care home once a week. And she wanted to keep her car. I've got to tell you, I was very proud because I managed to keep her licence. We won the case. And it was one of the last cases I did. But I've got to say, the nature of the 3-point turn was pretty disastrous. My job as a young barrister was to represent this woman and represent her interests and let the, courts do their work. But I was surprised that I won, but pleased that I won. People are living a hell of a lot longer than they used to. And you might say that the really dangerous drivers are the young drivers. Crashes on the whole are younger people. Older people who've been driving for years. The oldest licence holder as of November was 109 years old. Staggering, still driving on our roads. Have you got a parent or grandparent that you're worried about that's still driving? How do you decide, if you're in your 80s, when is the time to stop driving? Do we need to be tougher, stricter? Should you really have to pass your test to keep driving post 70? Or is this ageism that's sort of creeping in when we know on the whole that it's younger drivers that are more challenged, younger drivers that we should be more suspicious of, not older drivers? Really want to hear from you. Call me on 0345 6060 973. I'm joined by Rob Hurd, chair and founder of the Older Drivers Forum and one of the authors of this report by the Older Drivers Task Force. Rob, thank you very much for joining me. Rob, why is this an issue?
I think as we age, we know that older motorists have a wealth of experience, confidence and tolerance, but however, our sight, hearing, reaction time and often judgment of speed and distance may not be as sharp as it used to be. And really what we're trying to encourage people to say is don't become complacent about your abilities as we age, but make sure when we do come to that time, like the age of 70, when we have to renew our licence, take it as a bit of an MOT test. Go and get yourself a medical with your doctor. Go and get an eyesight test with an optician. Undertake a voluntary driving assessment to brush up on your skills. That way, when you do sign that declaration to say you're fit and healthy on the road, you're doing it with confidence and hopefully therefore be safe on the road.
But are there enough accidents being committed by older people to merit the idea that they should have to take a test to pass their car, to carry on driving when they've been driving for so long. And wouldn't 70 be too young, given that we're all living so much longer than we used to?
Yeah, I think, as you were saying, young drivers certainly are disproportionately much more responsible for collisions than older drivers. But, as we do age, as you mentioned, that does increase. Certainly as we get over the age of around about 80, things start to change. Now, we're not supportive of compulsory retesting of a normal driving test, because that's really just... The countries that have done that across Europe, they've done it for many years, and a lot of them are rescinding what they did because they found it ineffective. But what they did found is actually implementing things like compulsory eyesight testing, about compulsory medical when we come to a certain age, and making sure that you're medically fit to drive. Now, if the GP or whatever is unsure about that, then they can signpost those people to a driving mobility centre who undertake fitness to drive assessments using occupational therapists and driving instructors. So there are ways there of doing it in a practical, sensible way, which helps and support people, rather than a test which really isn't really just making sure you're fit and healthy to drive on the road. It's just getting you to test a certain number of reversing and various different mannerisms like that, which are great for young drivers, but not really practical as we get older.
Am I right that it's younger drivers that are more dangerous than older drivers on the roads?
Definitely, yes. I mean, there's a small proportion of older people on the road who really shouldn't be driving on the road. And sometimes that's that complacency where they stick their head in the sand, say, I'm only doing a short distance, I should be fine, and I think those are the ones which sometimes come to the highlight of the press and things. But the vast majority of older people, our stats show that they're actually very good drivers. They're safe, they're diligent, they're careful about what they're doing. But there are those who decide, that they will take that risk. And I think that's where only by some laws, like a compulsory eyesight test, maybe a medical or something like that to brush up on their skills, would be the way to cut out those ones who are trying to play the system, if you know what I mean.
I've got some figures in front of me. It shows that older drivers involved in serious crashes are more likely to have failed to look properly than younger motorists. The error contributed to 30% of incidents in which at least one person was killed, oh my dear, or seriously injured on Britain's roads. This is over since 2016, involving drivers aged over 70. So the issue is definitely eyesight, which is why you're putting the stress on eyesight. It might be night vision as well, by the way. And that's compared with 22% of younger drivers. So it's the eyesight bit. Now, the question is, should you leave it to be up to the driver, or should you make it more mandatory, that eye test?
Well, we're pushing from the Old Drivers Task Force for a mandatory eyesight test at the age of 70, and therefore every year thereafter. We're doing it from 70 because that is the age we currently tick a box to say that our sight is perfectly fit. Although we are very much supportive of thinking, actually, we really should be having an eyesight test at all ages. When you come to pass your driving test, you should be getting a proper sight test with an optician. You should do it we would recommend every 10 years when you renew your licence with a normal, when you do your photocard one. Great opportunity, because having a regular eyesight test is very much good about picking up early medical conditions that therefore can be treated, but also allow people to carry on driving much longer and safer, because our sight does deteriorate as we age, often without us being aware of it. So the three things why we think an eyesight test should be compulsory is: one, to check your acuity, your ability to view the distance; one, to check your peripheral vision, because as you were mentioning, a lot of collisions involving older drivers happen when we're turning right across traffic, and that's sometimes maybe because of lack of mobility, but often about eyesight. And the next one is contrast sensitivity. That ability for our eyes to be able to see quickly between dark and light, so driving at night and in between a shady area and a sunny area as well. And a 20-metre number plate test, I'm afraid, is no longer fit for purpose for checking any of that.
I think a lot of people saying that this is ageism, frankly. They're against it. And some people raising, as you're speaking, loneliness, that their car represents for them their independence, their ability not to be entirely reliant on relatives, on friends, to be able to get about. Not everyone lives in London with the Freedom Pass. So a lot of people saying, why are they coming after us just because we're a bit older?
Yeah, and I think what you've got to look at is we're ourselves with the Older Drivers Forum. We're about our key message is driving safely for longer, but also helping people to identify when the right time to retire from driving. So some people carry on driving too long, some people give up too early because of lack of confidence. So we're about trying to help
109 the oldest person driving too long.
Well, what I would say, I don't know. I don't know that person. They may not drive. We find from a lot of research that we've done, there's a lot of people into their very latter years are holding on to a licence because it's easy to renew, and actually that's the only form of photo ID that you have, and they've got no intention of driving. So it's difficult to know whether that person's driving or not, and that's the difficulty in that. But I mean, I have come across people. Recently, I did a talk to the IAM Road Smarter group there, and there was a lady there who was 86 years of age, and she'd just passed an advanced driving test. Now, that just shows to me that we all age differently. We have drivers in their 40s who are no longer safe to drive, but we have drivers in their late 80s, 90s who are perfectly fit to drive. So it's all about how we age differently, and it's treating us as individuals and making sure that we are fit and healthy. But the stats do show that as we age, our sight does deteriorate, and therefore it's so important that we have compulsory eyesight testing.
Rob Hurd, Chair and founder of the Older Drivers Forum and one of the authors of this report by the Older Drivers Task Force. Thank you so much for kicking off the discussion this afternoon. Very, very grateful indeed. I've had a text here. I'm a young driver and I find often that older drivers take much longer to react. They may always make the right decision, but the problem is the time difference, which can lead to accidents, as it's hard to predict their movements. They're a hazard, frankly. Pretty strong stuff there. Jean, in Wallingham in Surrey. Jean, I think you're 93.
I am. Good morning and a good new year to you. Or good
Happy
afternoon.
New Year to you, Jean.
I'm 93 and I'm still driving. And I will know. I'm a good driver. I've driven all my life. And if you are a good driver, you're always a good driver. I get my eyes tested once a year. And they're always, the optician will say I'm well above the rate for driving. I don't go long distances, but I do my own shopping. I can attend a Keep Fit class. I can meet my friends. I'm only doing a local area, and I do not drive it at night because I don't go out at night.
Yes.
But it is my independence.
Yes.
And if that is taken away, where I live, I would have quite a walk to get a bus, and I'm not able to. That's the only thing. I'm not really able to walk great distances.
Yes, yes.
But I'm not disabled in any way other than I have asthma. But we pay, my insurance is very high. I pay £700.
Have they whacked it up because you're 93? That feels a bit unfair.
Well, they've whacked it up. They whack it up for your age.
Yes.
I mean, it should have been 900 and something, and I talked them down. But I'm now on. I'm now on only driving 1,000 miles a year, which I don't do.
Mm.
I drive less than that.
Mm.
But my insurance is 700. Mm. My road tax is 240.
Mm. Mm.
So, but I will know myself.
And what's your instinct, Jean? You're 90. What's your instinct? Have you got any instinct as to when you think you'll pack it in?
No. If I feel I'm doing something stupid a couple of times, if I think, oh gosh, that was a silly thing to do, I will give up driving. But I'm not a 93-year-old that drives at 25 miles an hour.
You're a 93-year-old that drives at 90 miles an hour.
I don't go over speed limits. And I no longer drive on the motorway. I've stopped that.
Yes. When did you stop that, Jean?
Maybe before COVID.
Right, so you were still driving on the motorway well into your 80s.
Pardon?
You were still driving on the motorway well into your 80s?
Yes, I was picking friends up at the airport.
Well, Jean, all power to you, basically. All power to you, and I hope you can continue driving for a few years yet. Thank you for calling in. Let's talk about this. Should we have mandatory tests for older drivers? We've now got double the number of 90-year-olds on our roads. Call me on 0345 6060973 if you're like Jean, you're in your 80s, 90s. When did you know? If you're worried about a parent who's driving or a grandparent who's driving, if you're a younger driver with a perspective, if you're a driving instructor with a perspective, let's hear you. Let's have this debate about older drivers. Call me on 0345 6060973. You can text on 84850 or tweet me, of course, at LBC.